As the Great Depression raged on, a lot of the things that happen when there's economic problems really raged through the country. And that's the idea that people were still concerned about getting theirs, right? And in times of economic hardship, social justice and racial justice tend to go by the wayside, especially as in this time of white supremacy, where people were more concerned about their economic individualism rather than trying to promote the greater good. Nativism is still going to rage on. Immigrants are going to be targeted. All those Okies that move out into the West, they're going to start targeting the Hispanic population out there as competing for their jobs. African Americans are really going to struggle during this time period. Many of the programs that we've discussed already were discriminatory, and many of them that we haven't discussed were also segregated or had discrimination built in. For example, the AAA harmed sharecroppers. Whether intentionally or unintentionally, that's what happened. The Civilian Conservation Corps was intentionally segregated. The TVA only gave skilled work to the white population. African Americans could get unskilled jobs in the TVA. Important for later on, we can see early movement towards what we're going to call redlining. The federal government, through the Federal Housing Act, supported mortgages for white families who were at risk of losing their homes. But there is no mortgage support in Black neighborhoods. There is some effort to provide some support for the Black population. Franklin Roosevelt did have what he referred to as the Black Cabinet, though there weren't really many official African Americans in the cabinet. One exception is, of course, Mary McLeod Bethune, who became the director of the Department of Negro Affairs, who was attempting to provide young African Americans with jobs. So that's one thing here. And I hesitate to say that Franklin Roosevelt was a man of his times because, first of all, that whitewashes history by saying that it's only the white population's opinion that matters. African Americans were struggling. Their history mattered too. Those were people of the time. We also know that there's a sizable white population that was also focusing on trying to help African Americans. One of those people was Eleanor Roosevelt. Eleanor became she was the first lady. She was beginning to become the moral compass of the Roosevelt administration, where Franklin was dealing with all the policy. Eleanor was the one that was out there speaking to the public and trying to show all the great things that she could do and become an activist. One example of the way that she tried to support the Black community was her efforts with Marian Anderson. Marian Anderson was banned from performing in segregated Washington, D.C. by the Daughters of the American Revolution. And they controlled the theater system. There's a lot of stuff there. Marian Anderson couldn't perform because of this segregated situation. Eleanor Roosevelt arranged it so that Marian Anderson would be able to perform in front of the Lincoln Memorial, an image that's going to come back later with both the threatened March on Washington in the 1940s and Martin Luther King's Jr. March on Washington in the 1960s. I also want to mention, too, that it's not just African Americans that are suffering. Native Americans are suffering as well. Remember that a lot of the territories that they were on were the ones that are going to be hard to hit by things like the Dust Bowl. They are suffering, and the New Deal did attempt to provide them some relief. There was an Indian Reorganization Act that was passed that had sought to try to give some of the land back and allow them to have that reservation territory and try to help them regain some of that culture, provide them jobs, those kinds of things. But it never really went far enough. And we're going to see that as we get into the 60s and 70s, part of the civil rights movement is also going to include Native American awareness as well.